Hello, Jason here from Instruō. This is a behind the scenes video that shows my approach to creating a module interface. So I ran cameras and time-lapse recorded the design process of the ceithir, which is this pretty ridiculous 58 HP quad multi-mode filter module. The real initial design process kind of happens in imagination, where I just spent time mulling over the features functionality that I want, and ultimately that ends up just being a straight list of parameters, of controls. And then I start to pull things into CAD and start moving things around. I did have an older module for this design as a starting point reference, and that's the 1047 multi-mode filter. So the ceithir is based on the same filter topology with quite a few more things added in. But yeah, like that was my starting point for the interface layout, was using the 1047 because it has a comparable collection of parameters and controls. So that gave me a starting point to then start moving things around from. So when I'm designing a module interface, the big first step is to lock in the layout of the control hardware. So that's the pots, jacks, faders, LEDs, buttons, switches. Yeah, I've got certain vague rules that I try to follow. If there's a hierarchy of different parameters, for example, then there might be a size of knob that's higher priority, and then placement of jacks, buttons, toggles that are related to a parameter. I'll try and draw shapes or try and keep them somewhat logically placed, but this is a very loose rule set. So once I've got the components placed, that's when I switch over to a graphic design program like Illustrator, and that's when I use the placement of the controls and start drawing lines and shapes and patterns and annotations to kind of fill out the interface and yeah, just pad the spacing between all the controls. So this particular stage of the design I kind of tend to binge on a bit. I'll set aside some time and just do some intensive sessions where that's all I'm doing for a day or two straight. And a lot of the times I find I get to maybe like 95% of the way there with the design. That way it's rendered, I've got the hardware positions of all the controls. I'll render out an image and just save that on my phone and then kind of live with it for a few days, although this can extend to weeks, months, in some instances years. I'll have a render that I'll just like keep scrolling back to and just see what ideas come up, or if there are any things that bug me after a certain amount of time. It's like, I don't like how that's positioned, I might like refactor that layout. But yeah, that's where the process really slows down. There's a lot of activity, I get a lot of it done, and then it just slows down a lot and it's just chipping away at the smaller details. So this particular design binge took place Christmas Eve of 2024 and a few days after. I was staying at my mum's place for the holidays, and yeah, I took a big chunk of time on Christmas Eve before family arrived, and then late night Christmas Day after everyone had left or gone to bed. And yeah, I just spent quite a few late nights just chipping away at this design. So for the format of this video, I'm going to be alternating between time-lapse footage. I'm going to be doing some voiceover narration and just to describe a bit what's happening on screen. It'll alternate between that and some sections of video screencast where I've kind of just done some video logs at the time when I was designing. That's where I talk a bit about what I'm thinking, what the plans are for the design, and kind of giving some info and updates at key milestone stages during the layout. So yeah, I hope this might be of some interest to anyone interested in module design. This is definitely very much my own personal approach to this design stage, at least. Yeah, I have no idea how other designers do it. We all kind of do the same job, but very different approaches, like very different backgrounds creatively. It's always fascinating just having those conversations and asking how others do it. I find it a lot of fun. Like, this is the approach that I've found works for me, but not sure I would necessarily recommend it to others. I'd definitely get by drinking way too much coffee and probably not sleeping enough when I'm doing these design binge sessions. But like this stage of the module design process, I find I very much need to allocate some time for, because I struggle to do this stage when I'm kind of just day to day at my normal work desk. But yeah, I hope you enjoy. And any questions, please feel free to join our Discord server, and I'm going to be doing many more of these videos, I think, because I enjoy doing them. So hope you enjoy. It is currently Christmas Eve 2024. Yeah, so my design project for this holiday is a quad multimode filter, sort of derived from the 1047. Just before leaving Glasgow for this break, I've been testing out a few bits of the circuitry, just confirming a few things. So plan for this is to go quad. Quite a few feature additions and modifications I'm planning. Input, I think I'm going to keep this inverted input, which by design has inverse control from the resonance. So resonance all the way down, that input is maximum gain. Bringing resonance up, it decreases. So on the surge, so the surge, yeah, it will be the VCFQ, that guy. Yeah, so the random source surge. Yeah, very nice sounding filter, AGC in. So that's, I think this is close to what I implemented for the inverting input. So they called it automatic gain control. So I think as resonance increases, this amplitude decreases. I'm not sure. Automatic gain compensation, maybe. Yeah, so this filter, key inbuilt one from a kit, it doesn't self-oscillate unless you patch the bandpass to the input. Then you can get self-oscillation. This is what I'm planning. So input, inverted input, gain control. I think I will probably include that tan H stage, the same that's on the 1047. It's a nice touch, I think. So I'll maybe make that a bit more coherent where it's labelled, so that it's it just softens the input a bit. Like if you put a triangle wave in, it'll shape it to a sine wave. Okay, pitch control, coarse fine, volt per octave, FN with attenuverter. This attenuverter, I'm going to modify the circuit to be more akin to the ARA, which is the attenuverter here, but this has got the shaping to kind of give it more of a tan H type S curve profile. So there's more resolution, but there's more movement range, there's more rotational resolution, for lack of a better term, towards this center position. So it means it's easier to find that center point. The 1047 also isn't calibrated, so the center position isn't necessarily the center, so I could actually center dent that pot for this new thing, which would be cool. Strike input, that's staying. Resonance with CV, that's staying. So this is the new stuff that I'm planning. Toggle switch. I think center position being the classic, I think that sort of makes sense. So yeah, the center will be the same as the 1047 in terms of max out resonance, and it won't self-oscillate, but gets very resonanty. Oscillator mode. So this is a quirk that I found by mistake, but ended up being a very useful find. It's a weird one. If I change the impedance between gain cells in the main throughput audio signal path of the circuit design, that combined with adjustment of the feedback for when it's self-oscillating, I can get it to self-oscillate with a stable peak-to-peak consistency, which actually makes it work as an oscillator. And of course it will then track as a full range. Yeah, so this I'll need to have a switch or some sort of switch controls, probably IC-based DG switches as I've specified here. When I go to this mode, I need to change the impedance of that resistor. So I need to punch in a resistor to bring it from 50k or something like that down to 5k, so order of magnitude. But it also needs to change the feedback calibration. So there need to be 2 trim pots where there used to be 1 on this. So that will change out a different trim pot for the feedback range, which I need to figure out how that circuitry is going to work. I'll figure it out. It also needs to potentially change out an alternate trim pot range for volt per octave, because I think changing that feedback ratio will change the tracking, which is annoying. Then last mode is resonator, which is the same as the 1047 with the feedback switch engaged. So resonator, oscillator, and filter are the 3 distinct modes that are entirely just down to how the feedback is curated and how calibration is defined. Okay, so there's going to be 2 groupings of outputs. What I've decided, kind of just bouncing some thoughts around, some ideas, and looking at other comparable modules to what I'm attempting here. Other examples, like the QMMF. It's got 2 outputs per filter, so it's got like a main output that you toggle switch to select between low pass, band pass, and high pass, and then there's a notch that is just fixed. What I'm thinking to do is actually keep these parallel discrete state variable outputs. This being a multimode filter, circuit-wise, is actually what seems to be referred to as a state variable filter that generates all 4 filter response types in parallel. Yeah, so that's what I'm doing. It's a state variable filter, but multimode is kind of the known term for describing what it does. That's the plan. I'm going to keep these as they are, so there will just be a discrete low pass, band pass, high pass notch. The notch I might pull from a different point than this 1047 version is, because the 1047 here, this is a CV controlled crossfader between low pass and high pass output. So if it's in the middle, or 1 times multiplier, then the center frequency is our notch response. Clockwise, I have the 1040. This is actually flipped, so it should actually be a quarter of cutoff, which means you turn it that way and you're offsetting it by an exponential ratio of where the center frequency is. Whatever that pitch is, you're going down to a quarter of that frequency or that side. So you're basically weighting it so that there's more. It shifts into being high pass response. If you go left, it shifts it to low pass response. There's another point in the circuit that you can pull out and get a more fixed natural notch. So I think I'll go with that. Then, so that's our pre-mix output. So they'll be static. They'll always be outputting if there's amplitude. There's not a VCA following that. So that gives discretion of getting any filter mode type you want. The post-mix. So this is going to have 2 outputs, post-mix primary and secondary. These are what will behave as left and right for stereo output. So this is what I tested in a patch at the workshop, where I was coming from 1047 and running 1 channel discrete left. Branch of that was going through a single side of the DAP, so 12 dB per octave all pass filter, with an oct modulating that, so it was going peak to peak, just swinging through the full range at quite a slow rate. Yeah, and then had that patched to the right output, so that was adding phase shift, dynamically shifting at a low modulation rate for the right channel versus left channel. So that worked really well. It's subtle. It's not compared to hearing the croon in stereo, which sounds huge and is like a very distinct. It's different content left and right because it's 3 unique phased sawtooth waves per side. Whereas this is a bit more subtle. It's frequency, it's phase displacement between the 2, so you're getting more of a stereo enhancement. Sounds good. So yeah, there's going to be 2 post-mix signals, because there'll be a VCA going to the main signal, which is then all-pass filtered. So a single VCA will control the stereo output amplitude. So that's the post-mixer stage, and that's what will go to the stereo output, combined output of the full thing. VCA level, that'll have CV attenuverter with a fader. I need to decide on that. I think I'll maybe go pot. I might have a switch option to add in a Zener diode based limiter, which is a circuit that I landed on, again by mistake. So many of my filter designs are things that I try out just on a whim, or completely screw up based on what the original reference circuit's meant to be. But yeah, there's a weird gain stage that I found, which acts as a very transparent limiter that stops anything from aggressively hard clipping, but doesn't really seem to affect things. I mean, surely there must be some detriment to the sound because it's a big gain drop and then a big gain boost. But so long as I've got my power well distributed, confident it should be okay. And if I have it switchable, so you can choose whether that limiter's engaged or not. So maybe having 2 options, maybe a 3-way toggle, so it's clean Zener, like this Zener limiting, or saturator that's more like the crewing. That could be pretty cool. Maybe have this on the per output stage, because that would be post-mix of the first source before it goes to the all-pass filter. That's what to do. The saturator option, it could be the same, or that could be a stereo saturator on the main output. Yeah, I'll have a think. Not sure on that. So the secondary output, that's going through a 12 dB per octave all-pass filter. Width control is going to be a crossfader. That's where I need another crossfader, of course. Okay, so it looks like it might be 3 2164s per filter stage width. Maybe make it equal power. I think this makes more sense to make it equal power. It's hard to know. Come back to that. Yeah, so the width control is taking that secondary output and having a crossfader between just a parallel of the post-mix output, or with it the width fully up. it will be crossfaded to being the all-pass filtered version. It's asymmetrical, but sonically I think works. I'm very happy with the results of it, so yeah, that's the plan. Should be fun. I think that's more of a global element, global rate. Yeah, I'll have like a crewing type section. So kind of like that. So there'll be this bit of, I'll make it four LFOs controlled from rate, and they'll be going to the phase offset. That's what there'll be. There'll be a jack, CV jack, which breaks normal from Intel and LFO. Yeah, so I've already written that down. Yeah, there's a lot to add in, so I need to use this as a starting point. I think this thing's probably going to be 52 HP. I think go to 52 HP at the widest for this, which is pretty wide. This thing will be a behemoth, but it's going to be quite fun to do. The first big step is creating a render, so coming up with a panel layout. So I've got these as a starting point. We shall see how it goes. Time-lapse time. Okay, welcome back to the present. Next up's a time-lapse section. So this is the first proper design session where I sit down and start placing the components for the interface, starting from the 1047's hardware interface as a reference point. I'm going to do a bit of voiceover narration just to talk a bit about what's happening on screen as this is happening, because a lot of activities crammed into a shorter amount of time. But yeah, here we go. So this is the 1047 as my starting point. There's a death metal soundtrack in the background. So already I've created a duplicate. So my version control approach for this process is I just make a copy of everything and just move everything to the right. So I can just quickly copy back and forth. There's a refactoring of my component list. So I've just done it as bullet points. So I can just check that off as I go. And here's the hexagon. So this was a design element that I had in mind quite early on, because there are 6 main outputs. So hexagon being a nice way to format that. So here in Illustrator, I'm laying out the hexagon, putting reference circles in all the corners. That way I've got exact coordinates that can match the origins of the jacks, and that gives me this single cluster that I can then move around. There we go. A bit of reordering just to get the best orientation for each jack. And now it's just a bit of moving around. I think quite early on I land on this angled chevron sort of triangle shape of the 5 pots. Yeah, there we go. So a lot of the time I'm just trying to find particular shapes or motifs or little somewhat logical bits of geometry that I can kind of use as a little graphical element, which I think at this stage, having done this over so many modules, I start having little ideas of where I'm going to place things graphically, in terms of like the gold lining and stuff, and circles and loops. So there I briefly pulled up the CSL faceplate, so that was me just referencing a previous design to get the maximum, or the highest Y coordinate of a jack. I've not really got a firm grid that I stick to when I'm designing. Things kind of just land where they land, and I kind of work module to module and reference the previous one, but there are a few that they've become go-to reference points for maximum height or spacing of buttons or jacks. So that's me ditched the fader on the input gain, because I decided quite early on I want this to be all rotary potentiometers. I think next up is trying to find the placement for all the CV inputs, because there are quite a number of CV input jacks on the filter design. It's a tricky one. I think the logical approach is often to go with more of a grid spacing, where you maybe just have more of a patch bay section of jacks and then a cluster of all the pots together, and keeping those controls quite separate. But I think what I found works for me, the approach that I quite like, is kind of just mixing it all up and just having the jacks in amongst the parameters, so that I can draw lines and draw proximity relevance between a CV input jack and it's close to the associated primary control. The CSLs a layout that I often refer back to myself in terms of a spacing of where I've got jacks in amongst a lot of different sizes of pots and knobs. The downside of that approach, of course, being if you've got things patched, then the cables maybe get in the way at times, but it's something that I've not found too problematic in the approach that I do with patching. So I think it keeps it more interesting for an interface like graphical design challenge. Just a little bit of moving around. I realised I was still at the 1047 HP, which was way too big. If I was doing that times 4, that was going to be my size allowance eaten up already. So here I'm just moving everything in a bit, finding a good HP that gives me enough space to fit everything comfortably. There's that arrowhead of jacks forming quite neatly, so I'm kind of just getting the spacing. Eagle's alignment and distribution tools, at least in this version, are not great, not the most sophisticated. So a lot of times I'm just using a calculator on screen to the side to, just take 2 coordinates, sum it, half it, and then add it to the lower one just to get that equal distribution. There we are, a bit more labeling, and that's everything aligned to what ended up being the final HP for a single filter on it. And you'll see the sort of less slanted side of the arrow of pots. Those are equal distance distributed across the HP of the faceplate PCB, or I think they end up that way ultimately. Like, this is me just bringing things in and just like fine-tuning that alignment. I need to save as much space as possible. So this is me even bringing in the size of the hexagon. It's close. It's tight. You can see the silkscreen ledgers are actually just overlapping between the jacks, but it does fit. Oh, there's the toggle switch in the middle, which not a good idea. I think thinking it through, I put it there, I was like, oh, that might fit, but then thinking if you got that patched, you're going to be digging in amongst cables to actually change toggle switch positions, which not a good idea. It's getting close. I'm kind of just honing in. So I think I'm onto something. So this is Illustrator open. This is the 1047. So I started from that as a reference point because it covers a lot of the bases that are the same between the designs. It's basically 4 1047s, but with extra stuff. Here's my list. Here we go. So I worked through this list of interface element. The only thing that's missing is the VCA stages, but I've got an idea for that, so I kind of left them to the side, but everything else I believe I have covered. Let's have a look through. So 1047, the plan from the get-go was this hexagon shape. I kind of just started with this line of main pots and ended up ditching the fader in preference of a pot. A hexagon here, I'll start to add more jacks, add more pots. So this kind of turned to an angle, almost like the scythe in some ways, but then branched off, so I ended up with this sort of arrowhead type shape. So that became a motif that stayed. So trying sort of matched lines of like half a hexagon there, V shape, starting to add another toggle switching elements. So this is the jump to pot, trying sort of a quadrant around that, toggle switch for the limiter. This stayed. I kind of like tried proportional, just variations, trying to keep these. This was loose, like I wasn't like basing this on an equal line, so this spacing is equal distribution horizontally, and just kind of eyeballing it, so this looks vaguely triangular. Adding in more jacks, like trying this sort of scoop curve shape. This evolved, so this became more of like an arrowhead. Can just slight tweaks. Here we go, so this is where the arrowhead sort of formed. I also shaved it off by some HP, so this was the same as the 1047, which is 16. I realised I need to condense it down, because if this is going to be 4 of them, that's going to be a lot of HP. There's going to be 64 HP alone. Too much, so 52 is kind of my goal. I'm going to be over 52, this is going to be a wide module. And this is where it started to tighten up, like trying different positions of toggle switches. I was going with this sort of like quarter circle curve that lined these, and then this became a sort of arrowhead. A lot of tweaking to find the sweet spot of what parameters are placed where. Minor tweaks. So here we are, this is our this is where I've landed. Done a little bit of shaping since this morning, so this is now that distance there, and that matches. I need to check that this distance to the edge, this phase CV input, matches the same. But I think this will work, and this is currently 12 HP. Yeah, that's 12 by 5.08. Yeah, 12. So I guess like ultimately what this will be is match that out, grab all this. Whoops. Copy. Yeah, I think this will work. So I think what I'm going to do is have this mirror it on this axis here, so it's kind of these out pointing arrows, and then the center will have this sort of global control section, and that will have like a main pitch, so we'll have one of these pots. I'll need to measure up the distance. Yeah, if it's going to be sort of equal spacing. Yeah, this is going to be a wide module, but that's fine. Yeah, so in terms of arrangement, this is low pass, band pass, high pass, notch. So that's our state variable parallel outputs. Coarse and fine frequency control. This is my main input, strike input, and inverted input. So this is like an input section curve. Limiter on the input, gain control. I'll find somewhere to put an LED. Could even be here. I could even have like a, maybe going an LED indicator there, because I've got this sort of empty space around. Like this could even move out slightly more. This could nudge in a bit closer. Yeah, there's room to play once it's in a configuration with duplicates. I'll be able to shave off some distance here and there. And also when it mirrors, these will stay constant, so it will stay low pass, band pass, high pass, notch in this orientation, and left, right. So yeah, coarse, fine, pitch control, volt per octaves in the middle here. We then have notch, which will graphically tie down to here with that thing. So these actually relate to this output. So this will be like the master morph. Morph might be a good term. We'll see. FM input, which is here. So this is the FM input. I might flip these. I think I probably will flip these. So I'll maybe have the FM closer, and then the width control will be at the top. So that's kind of mirrored across this line. Yeah, that could work. Q, so that I can swoop in here. I could even like follow the curve around the sort of double loop shape thing. This is resonance mode. What were the terms that I landed on? Can't mind. What was it? So whatever that's called. I guess just filter mode, oscillator mode, resonator. That's what it is. So decide which order priority they are in terms of position. This is, what is that? I should label these. Post outputs, saturation switch, saturation. That's what it is. That's going to engage the Zener diode limiter stage in the output. Because I realised I could have both. I could have the. Now it makes more sense having it a global thing on the stereo output. I think that's what I'll do. Yeah, I'll have the main saturator on the stereo output section, which will be in the center here. This is left and right output, so I might flip them as I go, maybe. So left and right for the stereo out. This is the output from our morph, like variable notch control. This toggle switch selects whether it's high pass, so it would morph from low pass to high pass, giving us a notch when it's in the middle, or changing to band pass, so it would morph from low pass to band pass, which means that we can get a band pass type response to this. So it means that we can get every filter type to our output with that combination, which is cool. The right output, this is through the width control. So the width is just a crossfader of this, either a duplicate of the left crossfaded to this being that source signal through an all-pass filter. So this is just a crossfader between that duplicate source or the all-pass filtered version. It's going to be modulated from an LFO that will be in the master stage. So we have master rate somewhere, and this is a CV input you could patch into. So it means that if you're monitoring from the right output alone, if you have this set to whatever filter type you want, so say you want low pass, you just have this all the way anti-clockwise, and then width all the way up. Width in the middle. Then that's a 50-50 mix of the dry low pass response mixed with the all pass filtered version, and then the CV input becomes your phaser input, or you could just use the built-in rate control. So yeah, it's got a phaser built in as well, which is kind of cool. Yeah, Next step to sort of tweak this, add in the stuff in the middle, and then jump over to Illustrator to try and make sense of all this. Yeah, Merry Christmas. Okay, time-lapse section 2. Yeah, this is how I spent my Christmas evening after everyone had gone home and gone to bed. I had the couch to myself and just designed a module. Here we go. So you can see that's me duplicating the single layout, duplicating it again and flipping it, so I've got the mirror image. A lot of this is just trying to find the sweet spot of how much extra HP I need to cram into the middle to fit the mixer section. I'll try a few things. I'll start with faders here, which I do quite like that. I think there's something quite satisfying about those vertical elements. Yeah, I think I quickly realised it's going to be too dense, or I think I just wanted to keep it all rotary pots, being one of the ideas that I had in mind, so I had to try it. As you can see here, I've gone with a sort of vertical triangle that's kind of in between all these offset arrowhead shapes, which I didn't like so much with pots, especially because the spacing was not balanced. So here I start to go less symmetrical. Yeah, I'll offset the stereo output at the bottom, and then I think I added more trim pots here as a test, because there was an idea if I could fit it would be quite nice if there were attenuverters per CV input, but it was going to be too cramped, and they would have had to be tall trimmer pots. Just tidying up some of the rotations and labelling. The mirror image element was quite interesting to deal with, because I had to figure out what elements to mirror, like whether toggle switches should match like left, right, or mirror. I think I kind of mixed it up in the end. I also realised I needed a fifth pot at a certain point because of the rate control for the LFOs, so this gave me the opportunity to go with a half hexagon type shape. There's the toggle switches and jacks added in for CV input and the limiters and routing. So there's a left-right input jack stage there. So this remained for quite a while before I expanded on the internal modulation bus stuff. So the plan was originally these were going to be the main stereo input. So you'd patch in there and that would branch out to the pairs of filters. Kind of redundant. The way I've gone ultimately was to just have the leftmost filter kind of normal and cascade to all the others. Updating my labeling again. Yeah, I ended up drawing some of those lines graphically just as a note to future me, just of what ones are attached to what parameter. Yeah, it's getting pretty close. I think the jacks at the top, I'm moving up all the gain pots and putting them as high as I can, because they were going to be tall trimmers at one point, just out of necessity. I thought if I just spread it out a little bit more, I can make them solid shaft pots as well, which I think will just feel a bit more robust. There we go, adding in the global volt per octave jack, kind of just spreading things out a bit. I think I realised I had a bit more room with the multiple filters now. Okay, that's me ready to switch to Illustrator to start drawing out some graphical elements. So a bit of fine-tuning, tweaking. I kind of brought these arrows in tighter, nudged them out a little bit. I've gone up to a knob for the gain pot, which I think should fits onto the PCB, so like the knob will be a bit above. I think that'll be close to what the arbor is for the wet dry mixer stage. So this is our left-right input for stereo in, stereo out. The way this will work: left normals to these two ends, right normals to these two ends. Yeah, so that will be configuration this way. I'm not sure whether I'll label it as left and right, maybe input with, keep it graphical, because the configuration will either be a sum of all stereo outs per channel, or it will be left will be a sum of these two, right will be a sum of these two, of the direct, like morph. Yeah, that'll be cool. Volt per octave, I'll do this as left, that as right, I think. Or maybe the other way around, maybe this one right, going that way, left going that way. Yeah, I think that'll probably give me more room to work with. So this will normal to these two, that will normal to these two, but this will normal to that. So this will be like our primary single volt per octave going to everything. Move these around a bit, so volt per octave is at the peak of the triangle. FM branches down here, Q will come down here, width will come down here, then notch. So it's kind of branching through. So graphically I think I'll be able to do something that indicates. Resonance modes, I'll need to figure out the spacing for all that. Limiter, saturator, so this will be Zener diode clipping stage, like on the Kroon and Karn. So either turning that on or off. Each of these limiters, that will be the Zener diode. Yeah, kind of like soft limiter. I think that will work. Width, that's got CV control. So yeah, like that. That branches down here per one. I'm unsure whether to try and come up with more parallels between channels. I think not. I think just keeping them as all discrete inputs. You could mult signals to them if need be, which is fine. Back to time-lapse. Oh, the phase. Yeah, the phase input. So that's like a direct CV input point from the LFO. So this is the LFO pot. I'll need to distribute for, unless I add more LFOs, just for shits and giggles, and maybe have that branched to notch. Although it would need to go in. There's not an attenuator per one. Yeah, no, I think just keeping it 4 LFOs and they're going to the stereo enhancement. That makes most sense. Yeah. Back to time-lapse. Okay, here's the big section. This is drawing the graphics, and I think I kind of chipped away at this over a few days, but it was mainly a few big sessions that I worked through this, and then kind of just kept opening it up and just fine-tuning and tweaking. But yeah, most of it was done in a big chunk. Yeah, you could hear at the end of that last vlog section, I'm kind of fighting against feature creep that's already coming in. I think this being an analog module, that simplifies feature creep because there's only so much circuitry I can actually fit. There's not a processor that could have different firmware changed out. Okay, here we go. This is opening Illustrator. So I'm opening side by side. I have to move the whole thing down by 128.5 because the origin of Illustrator is the top left. Strangely, my Y coordinates are negative in Eagle, and they're positive going down from top in Illustrator, which does seem to be the more common approach in CAD, so I think Eagle's the odd one out. KeyCAD has the same orientation, which is handy. So this is me just placing holes with the reference diameters that I use, copying over, duplicating. So because there's so many patterns, I can do it quite quickly. I don't need to go and coordinate match every single thing. There are probably much more efficient ways of doing this where I could export a coordinate list, but yeah, just never quite got round to doing that. Here's me copying in over the reference knob, so this gives me a much stronger sense of spacing and scale for it, so I can actually see where there's space beyond just the component footprints, because it's very easy, I found, to put things too close together when I'm just working with the footprint components in Eagle or KeyCAD, because the jacks spread out a little bit more. Knobs always take up a lot more space. Yeah, it really starts to quickly sort of flesh out. So here I'm opening up previous designs just to get the little design assets. So the loop-de-loop bit. I think I pulled my signature from the Winston try. There it is. So I don't know if there's a better way for doing this in Illustrator. A lot of the times if I'm moving something, I'll draw, because the origin is centered around the mounting hole for a jack. Yeah, so already I'm starting to move things around in bigger chunks because I realise the spacing doesn't work in Illustrator. So I'm kind of going back and forth and modifying my reference Eagle file. Yeah, there'll be times where I draw a big circle in Illustrator, and that's because it's origined on the center point of the hole, like the origin of the part. And if it's an asymmetrical shape, like the loop-de-loop, then I'll draw a bigger circle around the whole thing, then I can move that, and the origin stays true. Then I'm spacing out and widening the height of the the jack triangles. So I think a lot of these changes I'm doing just in Illustrator to get it looking right, as much as possible, and then I go back to Eagle and update the coordinates of the hardware plots. Yeah, they're trying to find the right position for the ceithir text, which kept on the left for a bit there. I think this one, it being so big, kind of like the troika where Instruō's offset to the side, I think like wider modules, I like that asymmetry of the branding and the labelling. We are moving around some of the toggle switches just to get the spacing looking better on the render. We are creating my my filter graphics. So they're just downsized versions of the 1047. I ended up going with both text and the graphics just because there was space, and it kind of fills the gap. A lot of it is, there are certain redundancies I find that I end up using in the graphical side of things, like adding in extra redundant text, like every single coarse and fine pot has got coarse and fine above it, but I feel like if I left the Menti on more than one, like there's a negative space thing that I never quite like. See, I pulled up the DAP faceplate there, so I'm just like going through different ones that I know I've done a similar control layout there, so how did I graphicalize that in that instance? So I'm just trying to keep little references to previous designs. Yeah, so that's the phase symbol. So here I've got a standard diameter of like gold ring to go around volt per octave, and then for CV inputs I cut it at a sort of semicircle. So there's a reference line that I use there, that purple line. So I use that to just draw where I want to keep it, and then create that as a expand to an object, and then I can cut the rest of the circle around it. And I use those as sort of like signifiers of CV inputs, and then have lines branching off to the associated parameter that they control. And here I'm just trying to do that sort of like double pinstripe lining, which again I don't have the strictest spacing guide. There's certain ones that I've done on different modules that I like, that end up becoming referenced a bit more and become sort of go-to dimensions. There, so this is copying the sort of dot labeling from the 1047, which itself is borrowed from the original ART 1047 for its variable notch. I don't know how accurate those dots are for the ×2, ×4, ×half, ×quarter multipliers, but it looks nice, just that symmetry and just the non-equal spacing around the circumference. Yeah, a lot of this is just trying out different lines to see what I like, what I don't like for representations of how to attach text labeling to knobs parameters, and then also branching that out to CV. Yeah, there's a lot of corners at this stage still. So I try different dividers around the hexagon just to see if drawing shapes and spacing around it works. Yeah, so this I tried doing more of an outline, but because it wasn't full space around it, it kind of ended up this sort of weird house shape, which yeah, I sat on for a minute, but I didn't really like. Yeah, a lot of these weird lines, I'm just using the same thing and just drawing lines as reference points and then measurements to try and keep spacing consistent. There's this sort of like double semicircle that I use as a strike input or a clock input indicator. So I've pulled it over from the 1047. Yeah, I quite like this when I sort of stumbled on it, is that sort of triangle within the triangle of the center 3 jacks having their sort of semicircle surrounds, and then using those lines themselves to extend round and reach the associated main potentiometer. Yeah, there's some funny wonky shaped lines that I ended up landing on. yeah, a lot of this stage is very much just trial and error, just coming up with an idea for a pattern or a way of drawing something, and just a lot of time can be sunk into doing that, and something's learned from it. Here's where I realized a lot of vertical spacing was going to be needed, because there are jacks in between, or switches in between that link the inner filters to the outer filters controls. So there are things that break up the division between the discrete filters themselves. So adding these vertical lines and dividers, that kind of added a bit more. Strangely, I felt like it added more space. Like when they were just empty, it kind of just looked like a much more imposing unit, but dividing it up just clarified the sections a bit more. Here we are. So this is me figuring out. I don't know if I decided at this point which distribution of the all-pass filter shaping it was going to be. I maybe didn't decide to mirror the whole thing to have the left filter's right channels be the phase modulated, and then the right filter's left channels. I think that maybe came later on, because I think I probably copied this over more consistently to start with. Anyway, the sort of double line around the width pot is a trick I've used on a few stereo controls, like on the Larach or on the Cure, just to show us a stereo signal. There, that's the limiter tan H shape, just adjusting that to fit this module spacing. I ended up keeping the same tan H logo for each of the limiter controls, even though the limiters are all quite different. This was a tricky one. The toggle switch text for the filter resonator and oscillator. Finding the right way of framing the words that are either abbreviations or truncations. I like that little sign symbol. I think it fitting in, it just adds another little flavour of visual graphics that are kind of akin to the filter type graphics, but yeah, it's starting to come together. Once I did that duplication and then mirror, like just when it starts filling out more of the space, it's really satisfying seeing it come together. Yeah, I think at this point I was realizing how much of the asymmetry was going to be tricky to deal with, and it was going to be very much a discrete circuit layout between the four filters, like more so between the left ones and the right ones, but even with the distribution of different modulation sources and signals, it was going to be a lot. And also realizing here how many of the lines that I'd drawn on the left were not going to translate perfectly mirrored to the right, just because of the reorientation of the text and graphics. So they end up quite different. I think it was quite a process, just trying to find solutions to keep consistent enough that it's clear you can recognize the pattern of what certain lines and graphics mean, but yeah, them being a complete mirror image and just slightly wonky compared to each other. It's quite fun. I think what happened as well, once I'd drawn the left filter, copied that over and then moved to the right and kind of tweaked it a bit, that kind of inspired the left design as well, so it kind of became a bit of a back and forth where I'm kind of just jumping all over between the two halves of the whole layout. There aren't really huge strict rules in how I like to graphically depict rotation around certain pots. If it's an attenuverter, if it's a bipolar potentiometer, then having the curved arrows around the top, or plus minus, or a center like line and notch from the 12 o'clock of the pot, that's a clear, obvious one. But then if it's more of an attenuator, I do try and have that semicircle where the 30 degrees from the bottom, like marker, it kind of matches the downmost position of the pot. You are getting close to moving on to the mixer stage, I think. Oh, this is me having moved back to the left 2 filters to try and just tweak things a bit more and get it balanced to what all the work I've done on the right side. Yeah, making decisions on where to add curves versus corners, because I kind of mix it up. Like there are certain like corners that I think look better, certain curves that I think look better, but it's very much just trial and error. I added in that one little impulse kick graphic on the left because there was a bit of space. I think that just added a little bit more annotation to the whole thing. Yeah, it's kind of not so much adding a clear list of the parameter names or text. It is annotating it more as if I'm annotating patch notes or schematics. So I think that's kind of a bit of an influence that I've found that I follow when I'm drawing interface graphics like this. That I tried out, I didn't ultimately like was that sort of cut out overlaid circles. I think for the Master Volpro Octave I tried that double circle just to indicate this one's got a higher order of priority. But yeah, I changed that ultimately. I quite liked how the jacks for the CV inputs for the VCAs, they fill that space that is a vertical line. So the line dividers, I've got gaps in it where the jacks fit, which I feel like it almost adds a layer of masking. It's almost as if like the center section is over the top of each one, so that I kind of tried to draw at a certain point to be like almost like it's on a stage coming towards you. This is where I landed on that weird little shape around the stereo output. Kind of looks a bit like a pig snout when it's like right up front. I think that's most noticeable on the little symbol that's used for indicating the way that the stereo mixer sums. If it's summing all 4 stereo pairs or summing just the 2 discrete from each left right. But I think it worked. I think because you can see the pattern 5 times across the faceplate. I think like the little symbol on its own, it's quite clearly referencing that, and it's not just a pig nose. Yeah, so this is a bit more of just moving things around in Illustrator to kind of balance where my eye felt it should sit, even if it wasn't strictly an equal distance. That's me also settled on filter, res, and OSC for the mode switch, which let it sort of wrap around the toggle itself, and I could mirror that and just kind of have them a bit more consistent either side. Yeah, so there's a lot of little tweaks I'm doing on Illustrator and then jumping back to Ego just to update my coordinates there. Here's me looking at old modules for visual reference. Sure, what I was doing there. I was looking for where to fit the LEDs for the LFOs, because I think originally I was planning to have them towards the right, but that's where those jacks end up being, so they end up being the opposite side. And I end up distributing it alpha, beta, gamma, delta, kind of in that order from left to right, even though it's rotationally anti-clockwise around the pot. I think this is maybe where I decided the direction for the toggle switches for the limiters as well, which are kind of mixed up across the whole thing. There we go, that's me drawing my little pig snout symbol. Yeah, just a bit more annotation as I go. Here, so I'm playing a bit with the arrow, which I do like this arrow shape that I've landed on. I've just copied from the first instance that I used it. It's very, very pointy, but it does translate quite well to the actual copper on the physical faceplates. But it's trying to find the position of if it's like an arrow and it's cutting a line. So there's maybe a line with the arrow pointing. It's like finding the right position of where to put it, and the size where it's kind of all over the place. I don't have a fixed size. I'm very happy with how this little graphical element came out. This is just filling in space surrounding those pots, but it also grouped those 4 level pots together and sort of set it apart from the rate control. So there's just a little aesthetic pattern in between that kind of just clusters them together, even though those 5 pots are equally spaced as a half hexagon. The graphics set them apart and kind of just add a bit more unique visualization to it. Anyway, that's the arrows I was talking about, just trying to find any use cases that they might be useful. Yeah, those are the little lines that are very much off axis. They're rotated to be in between the angle between the 2 inputs. I spent quite a lot of time on there's that sort of like distance thing, like putting a double line around the mixer section. I think made quite a big difference. I spent quite a lot of time on the arc that's above the main like global frequency knob. Yeah, I didn't know whether to draw it circled all the way around or to keep it a bit more just like a hat on top. What I ended up settling on was something a bit quirky. I think it's one of these. It's almost like a maze, but with I guess like more of like an Escher type. The shapes don't make sense. Like it's like a line that branches round, but it's not a double pinstripe line. It's like a single line that folds round, but then it cuts at certain points. Yeah, I quite like just weird patterns that... There's the pig nose. So we're getting into just more fine-tuning detail annotations. Double line spacing, just seeing how it could work with the maximum height. So the gain pots, they're actually very high up compared to a lot. I think they might be close to where the arbor center wet dry knob is for height. They might even be a bit higher. Like the highest the potentiometer footprint can actually fit, although the knob is on top and that kind of spaces it up a bit, which makes it tricky for putting the labeling up top. I think I tried at one point putting the Instruō text somewhere along the top, but there was nowhere that that's something that we've tried to standardize, is the position and size of the Instruō text as a logo at the head of a module. Just try and keep it consistent across the range. So this will be a sort of worked in with some updated faceplates over years to come. As we run out of stock, I'll rerun boards, try and get things to being all the same height for the titles. But yeah, there was just no space. So for the first prototype faceplate, I went with an hourglass buried beneath the solder mask to try and have it textured. I think I'm going to go back to making this a signature model, so I'll have my signature stamp at the top as it is in this render. Some LED placement. Yeah, it's very close at this stage, so that a lot of this is just fine-tuning, and this is it doesn't change a lot. It's just little modifications here and there as I go, and I just kind of any spare moment from having a coffee, I'll just open my laptop and just like tweak a little bit over the coming days. yeah, there we go. So that's my process of drawing out a module interface. A lot of just trial and error. There's not a lot of logic to the whole process. A lot of it's just been approaches that I've done time and again over many years, over a lot of different modules. And I guess like one of the tricks is just sort of zooming out and just, if I'm squinting at the panel, like if it looks balanced, if it looks like there aren't any glaring holes or gaps. I think over the years, like the evolution of the way that I draw graphics, things have got a lot more, maybe denser. I think like I put more lines, double stroke lines, I add little bits of additional text or annotation just to sort of fill things in. Like definitely looking at the older troika or tri or tona, there's a lot more empty space around the gold lining. So it's maybe evolved into higher complexity of graphics over time, but yeah, a lot of it just is going by gut, just going by what I think feels right and what I think looks cool. So yeah, that's the kind of the hard part done. That's once this is locked in, I know where the components go. A lot of the times, in this case, the schematic's largely done because it's the 1047 that I've already designed. If it's something completely new, then if it's a digital board, then again, it's just working through the process of picking the processor, picking the peripherals, and just fitting it around logically in the schematic. If it's a new analog circuit entirely, a lot of the times at this stage, I've maybe run a test board that is not even module format. It's just a big development board that I can then get in and circuit bend, or kind of a lazy way of breadboarding, because I don't trust breadboards. Too many things that can go wrong and influence the circuit, or you lose track of what's where. So a lot of the times I'll just start with a PCB layout of a circuit. But yeah, at this point the interface is locked in for the most part. I tweak it over time, but this kind of gives me a lot of headspace after this is done. It's quite cathartic. It's like, okay, I can just live with this image on my phone just to look at and just see if anything stands out or ideas come, and I can just start chipping away at the schematic. Once the schematic's locked in, then placement of the components, that's a bit more methodical. It's something that I can kind of do as a background task with TV on in the background. I don't need to be so as focused as this stage, where it's a lot more the creative design part. It's kind of like, to me, I feel like it's the difference between practicing scales or arpeggios versus writing a song, where you need to be fully in the creative headspace to create something. Whereas if you're just going through technique stuff, then that's a bit more. You can do that more offline. But, yeah, hope you enjoyed this. Thanks for watching.